All right, my dears, hope you're doing well. We're continuing our saga of Manifest Destiny. There's a couple things that I want you to be taking note of. First and foremost, I want you to recognize some trends that are happening. You see here that we have the Mexican-American War. We just talked about the Texas War for Independence, so a lot of war going on, where previously we would purchase land or annex land or write treaties for land. We're now fighting wars. And it might be because of our great desire for this land, but also the spread of slavery and all sorts of things like that. So let's continue with the Mexican-American War and our manifest destiny. So this war lasted 2 years, from 46 to 48, and good thing too, because we talked about how in 1848 something very shiny and wonderful was discovered in the land called California, and that's what we're fighting over. Isn't that great? So anyway, Polk is president at the time. Now, meanwhile, we're very interested in California, and we're willing to pay for it. We actually offer the Mexicans $25 million to have California. California isn't what we think of it today, the state of California. It's much larger than that. We're looking in Nevada, into Arizona, and areas, Utah, right? Those areas are the areas of California that we're looking to. That's known as California. The people that live there are called Californios, which are Mexicans who live in California. And the land is precious to the Mexicans because it is good farmland. It's beautiful, right? So it's something that they are not willing to give up. They won't sell it. And like I said, Polk is president at the time. Now, Polk is a very different character from other previous presidents that we've seen before. He was our dark horse candidate, and he wants to prove to everybody that he's wonderful and he deserves this position, right? So also, at the same time, I want to you to keep in mind that Santa Anna, you remember from the Texas War for Independence, has been exiled from Mexico because he did such a bad job at trying to keep Texas, and he lost it, right? So he was exiled, and I want you to take that little nugget of information and just put it on the back burner for right now. So the land that we're looking at right here, right? So here's the Mexico, right? But the land that is in this stripy area is land that's disputed between the United States and Mexico. What that means is when the Texas War for Independence happened and Texas won Texas, right, we weren't really sure where the boundaries lay, right? So is it all of this territory here, or is it just this territory? Obviously, Mexico claims it for themselves, but the United States says it's ours. So Polk wants to take action. And if you notice, there's not really a lot of geographical boundaries that we can use, except for the Rio Grande is obviously a very significant geographical boundary. However, Mexico says this belongs to them. So Polk makes a very rash decision. And he talks to the general of the military at the time, a guy named Zach Taylor. Zachary Taylor was asked by Polk to gather up his troops in all of their military regalia, in their full uniform and their weapons, and head towards the Rio Grande and set up a blockade on the Rio Grande, on the Mexican border. Just as a show of force. Now, Polk is the commander-in-chief, but this action is quite questionable because, of course, as soon as the Mexicans see this blockade of military American soldiers dressed up in their uniforms and have their weapons with them, I mean, what are they going to think? Obviously, they're going to see this as an act of war. So nobody was really sure what Polk was trying to get out of this. In fact, Abraham Lincoln even said that Abraham Lincoln, who's this young whippersnapper of a senator, says, I doubt Polk's sincerity, right? I'm not really sure what his sort of goal is by doing this. So when the Mexicans see these soldiers that are up on their border, they start shooting at them, and soldiers die. So because that happens, Polk is like, oh, we have to go to war. We have to go to war. They spilled American blood on American territory. We have to go to war. So this is why people are questioning why Polk, or what Polk is doing. Now, again, things happen so quickly that there really isn't any legislation that's passed through Congress, war just sort of breaks out, and that's it. So technically, Polk declared war on Mexico, which, as you guys know, is not a right that he has under the Constitution. People kind of just swept it under the rug, though, because in the end, they want to get California, so they just sort of let it slide. So that's crazy. So let's talk about what happens with this war. Now, this is a terrible picture, and I don't even know why I have it here, but this is Zachary Taylor. And Zachary Taylor, who, like I had said, is the leader of the military at the time. And he came up with a 3-pronged strategy. We've talked about these types of things before. Think of a fork. It's got 3 prongs, and you stick it into your food at the same time. It's the same thing with a 3-pronged strategy attack in the military. You're attacking 3 specific spots at the same time. Zachary Taylor is going to head towards the Mexican border. And then you have Stephen Kearny. Stephen Kearny is a military leader who hails from New Jersey, which is why you have Kearny, New Jersey. And he's going to attack on the Santa Fe Trail and try and kick out the Mexicans there. And then you have John C. Fremont, who's going to fight in California. Fremont is also known as, aka, the Pathfinder of the West. He's blazed many trails out west, and he kind of knows that territory. So you've got Taylor in Mexico, Kearny in Santa Fe, and Fremont in California. So we're attacking these 3 areas at the same time. Now, one of the most important battles that occurs is known as the Battle of Buena Vista, where Zachary Taylor is going to be completely outnumbered by the Mexicans. So much so that it's like he's like 4-1 outnumbered. Now, there's a lot of big names that are going to be in these battles that you may have heard of before. Names such as Ulysses S. Grant. He's a soldier in the army at the time. And in fact, there's a really amazing story at the Battle of Buena Vista where on the front lines, the American soldiers who are obviously down in numbers are struggling, and the lines are starting to break, and they're running out of ammo. And Ulysses S. Grant sees this happening. So he decides that the fastest way to get to these center lines is to go in front of the Americans, so in between the Mexicans and the Americans, and hand off ammo to the Americans who are running out of ammo. So what he does is he takes his saddle and he puts it on the side of his horse, not on the back of the horse, on the side of his horse, and has a couple of his guys help put him into the saddle, and then pile on all of the magazines that they can, the bullets on over him as fast as he can, as many as he can hold, and then has somebody hit the side of the horse, and the horse starts running. Now, he's literally hanging on for dear life on the side of his horse, but the horse is running in front of the Americans while bullets are just like raining all around him. So what's happening is that the Mexicans, all they see is a horse just sort of running randomly in front of them, but what they don't realize is that Ulysses S. Grant is on the side, hanging on for dear life. He unmounts his horse, hands off all of the magazines of the bullets to the American soldiers, and they were able to keep the lines from breaking. So, like, Grant gets his start here. Robert E. Lee is fighting in this war, right? So there's a lot of, like, huge names that are fighting alongside of each other. So Zachary Taylor, so you have people like Grant and Lee fighting for you, even though you're outnumbered, you're still going to win. So Zachary Taylor is going to defeat the Mexicans. He gets the nickname Old Rough and Ready because he's kind of scrappy, right? And word just sort of spreads throughout the United States about these amazing heroic stories about the Americans defeating the Mexicans at Buena Vista. And the name that is across everybody's lips is, of course, Zachary Taylor. But unfortunately, James K. Polk is not thrilled with this. In fact, he's very jealous of the fact that everybody is talking about Taylor and not about him. So he fires Taylor. This is just a move out of pure jealousy and emotion and rashness. This has nothing to do with anything other than that. Taylor just defeated the Mexicans in this heroic battle, and he just removes him. And obviously his popularity is going to go down. So when he does this, he's going to hire a guy named Winfield Scott. Now, Winfield Scott also has a nickname. He's known as Old Fuss and Feathers because he's very particular about things. If there's a button out of place, if your boot isn't tied correctly, right? He was very particular with those types of things. That's why they call him Old Fuss and Feathers, because he's fussy and he wants to be very, look good. So I'm very eloquent today. So Old Fuss and Feathers, Winfield Scott, right? He's very disciplined, very, very disciplined, and he decides that he needs to lead the troops into Mexico City. Now, meanwhile, Santa Anna. I had told you to put that little nugget on the back burner, bring it up to the front burner. Because Santa Anna, who had been exiled to the United States, decides to meet with Polk. And he tells Polk, he's like, listen, I'm so mad at the Mexicans for exiling me. I worked so hard for them and they give me nothing. So I'm going to spy for you. And I will spy for you, he's talking to Polk, if you pay me $10 million. Now, if you're Polk, right, you would be a little suspicious of Santa Anna. But this is Polk. And he says, sure, let's do it. They shake hands. Polk hands over the $10 million to Santa Anna even before anything happens. And what do you think is going to happen? Well, I think if you're thinking the way I'm thinking, Santa Anna will head back into Mexico and he double crosses us. He takes the money and he runs and tells Mexico all about the plans about Winfield Scott heading towards Mexico City. Oh my gosh, Polk, like, what are you doing? Thankfully, Winfield Scott and his soldiers are so well equipped, so much more so over the Mexicans, that we defeat them at what's known as the Battle of Chapultepec. Scott is going to take over Mexico City, and once we take over Mexico City, then we are going to win this war. Now, of course, like I said, there's battles that are happening all over the place in California and in the Santa Fe Trail and in that area as well. But ultimately, once Winfield Scott goes into Mexico City, he's able to take down the Mexicans. So we have to have a treaty, right? Because we just won a war. And the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo, which is probably the most fun treaty to say. Just say it. Just try it. Guadalupe Hidalgo. This treaty in 1848, you would think would just be like, we get California because we won the war fair and square. So that's part of it, right? We get this land called the Mexican Cession, which is this area highlighted here. But for some unknown reason, we also decided to pay Mexico $15 million for the land. Part of it is guilt money. We felt bad that we're taking this land for them. But should you feel bad? We won a war, right? So we're willing to pay them $15 million sort of as like restitution for their loss of land, right? But again, like I said, we had just won the war, so this shouldn't have happened. So if I were, I'm not a math whiz, but if I count the $10 million that we paid Santa Anna plus the $15 million that we give them in guilt money, that equals roughly about $25 million, which is what we offered Mexico in the first place, not including the money that we spent sending the soldiers over, paying the soldiers, the casualties, the loss of life, so on and so forth. So, it kind of became it became a bad taste in everybody's mouth with all of this happening. However, like I had said, this was land that we had wanted, and now we have. Now, of course, the question is, I'm going to go back. Whenever we gain new territory to the United States, what's the question? What do we do with the land out west? This Gadsden Purchase, we're going to talk about a little bit later. And we're going to talk about why we needed this land. But right now we're focusing on this. So, again, the question is, what do we do with this land? And when I say, what do we do with this land? Do we have slavery or no slavery? Well, David Wilmot created a proviso, which is like a document that he passed through Congress saying that no slavery should be allowed on any land gained from the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo. So, yay! So this is like a nice moment of, abolition. We shouldn't have any slaves. And by the way, there was no slaves out there anyway. So let's just keep it that way, right? Well, of course, it didn't pass. We have 15 free slaves. We have 15 free states, 15 slave states. They don't want to upset this balance. Yada, yada, yada. It didn't pass in Congress. But because of this, right, there's a lot of arguments that are going to happen, right? This question of popular sovereignty, states versus territories, should they choose to have free land or slave land or so on and so forth, right? It's causing a lot of problems, a lot of animosity within the United States. Because what are we really arguing over here? Are we arguing really over states' rights, or is it just the right to have slaves? Is really what the question comes down to. So people that supported the Wilmot Proviso were unhappy with this gag rule of this Wilmot Proviso, created a political party known as Free Soilers, which basically, it's kind of a funny word, but it's saying like all the land that we gain, all the soil that we gain from Manifest Destiny should be free, right? That's really what it comes down to. And unfortunately, the more land that we gain, the more animosity we have with each other, the more arguments that we have, and the more trouble that we're running into, okay? The next step on our list of Manifest Destiny is going to be a fun one, less war, which is nice, which is obviously going to be the gold rush. But that's a story for another day. Hope you guys enjoyed. And keep up the good work, and hopefully I get to see you soon. Stay healthy. Bye.